Hey guys, welcome to the Yellow Shirts podcast about sports. I am Andrea and I have with me
Ana Luisa Doracio.
Today we are going to talk about important sport competitions. I'm going to start with the Olympic Games. Let's see a bit about its history. The first written records of the ancient Olympic Games date back to 776 BC, when a cook named Coroebus won the only event, a 192-meter foot race called the State, to become the first Olympic champion ever. However, it is believed that the Games had been going on for many years by that time. If we talk about Greece, we cannot forget about the legends, and the legend has it that Heracles founded the Games, which by the end of the 6th century BC, this had become the most famous of all Greek sporting festivals. The ancient Olympics were held every 4 years, between 6th of August and 19th of September, during the religious festival honoring Zeus. The Games were named for their location at Olympia, a secret site located near the western coast of Peloponnese Peninsula in the southern Greece. Their influence was so great that the ancient historians began to measure time by the 4-year increments in between Olympic Games, which were known as Olympiads. The participation in the ancient Olympic Games was initially limited only to the freeborn male citizens of Greece. There were no women's events, and the married women were prohibited from attending the competition. In 393, the Christian Emperor Theodosius I called for a ban on all pagan festivals, ending the ancient Olympic tradition after nearly 12 centuries. The Games would rise again, largely thanks to the efforts of French Baron Pierre de Coubertin. Dedicated to the promotion of physical education, he was inspired by the idea of creating a modern Olympic Games after visiting the ancient Olympic site. In November 1892, Coubertin proposed the idea of reviving the Olympics as an international athletic competition, respecting the tradition to be held every 4 years. And very soon after, just 2 years later, he got the approval he needed to found the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, which would become the governing body of the modern Olympic Games. The first modern game took place in 1896 in Athens and featured 280 participants, all male, from 13 nations, competing in 43 events including track and field, gymnastics, swimming, wrestling, cycling, tennis, weightlifting, shooting, and fencing. It features the first Olympic marathon of the 42-kilometer route run by the Greek soldier who brought the news of victory over the Persians from Marathon to Athens in 490 BC. Fittingly, Greece's Spiridon Louis won the first gold medal in this event. All the following Olympiads had been numbered even when no games took place, and here we mention the games that were supposed to happen during the First and the Second World War. The official symbols of the modern games is 5 interlocking colored rings representing the continents of North and South America, Asia, Africa, Europe, and Australia. The flag features the symbol on a white background and flew for the first time at the Antwerp Games in 1920. The Olympics truly took off as an international sporting event after 1924, when the 8th edition was held in Paris. 3,000 athletes, with more than 100 women among them, from 44 nations competed that year, and it was the first time when there was a closing ceremony. The Winter Olympics debuted in 1924 as well, including events such as figure skating, ice hockey, bobsledding, and the biathlon. 80 years later, when the 2004 Summer Olympics returned to Athens for the first time in more than a century, nearly 11,000 athletes from a record 201 countries competed. In a gesture that joined both ancient and modern Olympic traditions, the shot put competition that year was held at the historical classical site in Olympia. Since 1994, the Summer and Winter Olympics had been held separately and have alternated every 2 years. The next Summer Olympic is Tokyo 2020, which for the moment has been postponed for 2021.
So for me, the first event sport is the Paralympic that came of London 1948 in the Olympic openings game. A German man whose name is Goodham make a competition, organized a competition with 60 in Europe of the Second War veterans. Growing in popularity, the event developed onto the first Paralympic Games, which were held in Rome, Italy in 1960. Taking place soon after the conclusion of the Olympic Games, the Olympic Styles game for athletes with disability attracted 400 participants from 23 countries who compete in each sport. Taking place every 4 years in the same year as the Olympic Games, the Paralympic Games have since grown into one of the most biggest sport events, with tracker a record for driving social inclusion. Following the Tokyo 1964 Games, the Paralympics were held in the different cities from the Olympic Games, including the first Paralympic Winter Games, which were held in Sweden in 1976. This is on the Summer Games and Winter Games, when two games once came together, with the Paralympics taking place short after the Olympic Games in the same venues.
The World Games were first held in 1981, are an international multisport event. It's for sports, discipline, or events within a sport that are not contested in the Olympic Games. It has a special and separate association that is in charge with organizing it, the International World Games Association, IWGA, but it is recognized by the International Olympic Committee and the IOC. It is generally considered the starting point of a sport on its way up to the Olympics, like badminton, beach volleyball, rugby 7, taekwondo, triathlon, and women's weightlifting, which now are events in the Olympics. While other sports like flag of war, for example, it has been an Olympic sport, but now it's not anymore. There is a variety of sports included in this competition, like orienteering, fin swimming, squash, korfball, billiards, water skiing, or dance sport. In most classes, it is necessary to qualify by a top ranking at the World Championships or a qualification tournament to be able to participate, just like in the Olympics. The difference from the Olympic Games is that the included sports of each edition are limited basically to the facilities available in the hosting city. There is no need for new facilities to be constructed for the games. Another difference is that since the winter sports are quite limited in number, there is no World Games for winter sports, just for the summer ones. Whatever winter sport we have, it's already included in the Winter Olympic Game. Generally, there are 25 to 30 sports included in the official program of the World Games. In addition, there can be invited some sports to participate. And to become part of the World Games program, the sport must be widely spread in the world, and the specific international sports federation must be a member of IWGA. The World Games are held every 4 years, 1 year after the Summer Olympics. Due to the postponement of Tokyo 2020, the next event is going to happen in 2022 in Birmingham, United States, then Chengdu, China in 2025.
For my second event sport, we have the World Championships. Is a title usually awarded in different combination or specific contests of some sport. Less or more common is a combination, example in different sport, the World Triathlon Championship, or determine the world champion who or which is the commonly considered the best nation, team, individual, or the inter-country. In the world in a particular field, although the vagaries of sports ensures that the competition recognizes the best event is not always the world champion. This may also be known as a World Cup competition, for example, cycling, when you have like USA World Championship and USA World Cup. Often they use for 10 cups or championship. In this sense, it's just a choice of words. Some sports have multiple championships because there are multiple organizations, such as boxing, mixed martial arts, and wrestling. Certain competitive exercises do not have a world championship or a World Cup as such, but many have one or several world champions. Professional boxing, for example, has several world champions at a different weight, but each one of them is decided by a title match, not a tournament. In the title match system, the championships can only be won by directly defending in the incumbent, who in turn must continue to compete to retain their title or risk for forfeiture. There are a few sports which already had a world championship in the 18th and 19th century. I thought it could vary how worldwide that competition really were. An example of this is of the considered the first international champion in real tennis since 1740, and the chess international matches have been held since centuries, often resulting in certain players considered the best of all in the first multiplayer tournament in London 1851. However, when Steinitz in 1886 was the first chess player generally recognized of the world champions in chess, and other sports with early world championships were the English throw and the speed skating.
The continent have their own championships for each sport or sport event in particular. So we will have European, Pan American, Asian, and African championships. Australia and Oceania nations are included in the Asian Championship sometimes, or they are doing a separate for the Oceania ones. Europe seems to have the largest variety and history in organizing different sports, perhaps because a lot of sports were invented here. Among the most popular sports of Europe, we find football or soccer, rugby, ice hockey, basketball, handball, volleyball, futsal, or field hockey for the team sports, or for the individual ones, golf, tennis, motorsports, cycling, athletics, or aquatics. While Europe has quite a wide list of more, let's say, international sports, Asia features a lot of competitions with games coming from the traditional sports that have been kept alive until today. Among the popular sports in Asia, we have football, cricket, baseball, basketball, badminton, table tennis, bandy, golf, motorsport, rugby, tennis, or volleyball. The American continent has among the favorite sports basketball, American football, ice ring and field hockey, lacrosse, racquetball, rodeo, ultimate, and volleyball, which were actually invented here, but also baseball, softball, skateboarding, polo, or surfing. For the individual sports, boxing, horse racing, golf, motorsport, or tennis seem to be the most popular ones. Africa mentions football as the most popular sport here as well, yet long-distance running and athletics, handball, rugby, golf, basketball, cricket, ice hockey, cycling, boxing, or mixed martial arts are as well present and popular in this continent. An interesting fact is that many people of the African diaspora represent African nations at the Winter Olympics. The most popular sports in Oceania are cricket, rugby, basketball, and the variation of the Australian football. All in all, the continents organize various games, and some of the sports seem to be equally popular in all the continents, like football or volleyball. The general rule about the organization of the continental championships is to be organized every 2 years, so that this would match the World and the Olympic Games.
Other of my sport event is the Youth Olympic Games. It's an international multi-sport event organized by the International Olympic Committee, and the games are held every 4 years in the strategic summer and winter events consist with the current Olympic game format, though it's in reverse order with winter games held in leap years instead of summer games. The first summer version was held in Singapore in 2010, so it's a new competition, while the first winter version was in Austria in 2012. The age limitation for the athletes is from 40 to 80 years old, and the idea of such event was introduced by Johanna Rosenfeld from Austria. In July in 2007, the International Olympic Committee members at the session, they approved the creation of this youth version of Olympic Games. The concept of the Youth Olympic Games came from Austria, from Johanna, and it was as a response to global concern about childhood obesity and the dropping participation of youth sport activity, especially amongst youth in developed nations. It was a further recognized youth version of the Olympic game will help the youth people.
My next one are the Universiade Games. There have been a long history of multi-sport events for students, and the university sports were active in the early 20th century. The first international university sports event was held in May 1923, when the first World Student Games took place in Paris, France. The events continued until 1939, and then there was a break due to the Second World War, which interrupted these meetings, but when the peace was restored, France already relaunched the World University Games. In 1959, the International Students' Union and FISU for the first time combined to organize the World University Games in Turin under the name of Universiade. Basically, this name is a combination of words between university and Olympiad. In 1960, France hosted the first Winter University Games, though there had been other games before. Athletes from 16 countries of the world took part in it, and the competition program included 5 kinds of sports. Until 1967, the Universiades were organized in Europe only, followed by the 5th edition in Tokyo. By 1968, the games were held yearly, alternating one year the summer and the following for the winter one. Starting with 1981, the Winter and Summer Games were held in the same year every 2 years. The majority of the events still happen in Europe. Asia started quite recently to organize more and more events, while the American continent only had 4 editions so far, and Africa and Oceania none of it. The next ones are set to happen in 2021, with the winter one in Lucerne with Switzerland and Chengdu, China.
In other sides, I have European Games. It's an international multi-sport event in the Olympic traditional concept by athletes from European nation and always celebrated in European country. The games were invested on governed by European Olympic Committee, which announced the launch for its General Assembly in Rome in 2012. In 2050, European Games is the first edition of the event, took place in Baku, in Azerbaijan, and in June of 2050, a further edition are planned every 4 years thereafter. In 2019, edition was held in Belarus in June, and the next edition is in 2023 in Poland. Is the next event. The European Games are not related to the European Championships, as separate multi-sport event organized by individual European sport federations, bringing together the individual Europe Championships of the athletics, swimming, artistic gymnastics, cycling, rowing, golf, and triathlon under a single brand on 4 yearly cycle beginning in 2018.
Alright, my last event is the European Youth Olympic Festival. This is a biennial multi-sport event held in odd-numbered years for youth athletes of Europe. Festival has a summer edition held for the first time in Brussels in 1991 and a winter edition which began 2 years later in Aosta, Italy. It was known as the European Youth Olympic Days from 91 to 99. The festival became the leading multi-sport event for young European athletes between 14 and 18 years old because it promotes sports and physical activity and inspires young people to take up sports. Following the Olympic principles, it fosters the spirit of friendship, fair play, tolerance, and it contributes greatly to the EU policies of youth and sports. The festival is also a great opportunity for hundreds of young volunteers to gain experience with organizing a big event, develop their work skills, and meet people from the European countries. The 11 Olympic summer sports that are part of the festival are artistic gymnastics, athletics, basketball, cycling, canoe sprint, handball, judo, swimming, tennis, volleyball, and wrestling. For the winter edition, we have 10 sports, which are alpine skiing, biathlon, cross country, curling, figure skating, ice hockey, short track, sky jumping, snowboarding, and Nordic combined. The summer festival gathers around 3,600 athletes and officials from 50 countries and 1,600 athletes and officials from 46 countries for the winter edition.
And for my last sport, I have the Panamericanos. I am from Venezuela, and this is one of the most important events in America. So include all the Pan-Americans country, the largest multidisciplinary international sport event, which athletes from American countries participate. The competition is held between athletes from countries of the American continent. Every 4 years is a period of Summer Olympic, and only one edition of the Pan American Winter was in 1999 and was the only one. The first one was in Buenos Aires in 1951. In this edition was 80 sports were played, and the second game were in Mexico in 1955. Also, they have the Panamericanos is with for athletes with disability, and the Youth Panamericanos which celebrate the continuous year. The most country who won in this event is United States, and is one of the most important events for all America.
Well, that's it from our side for today. We hope you enjoyed it. For the next week, we will have Andreea as guest, with whom we will talk about the experience of volunteering in sports.
Thank you and see you.
Bye bye.